Welcome to the learning channel Let's Talk Procurement. Today our episode number is 42. I will give you detailed information about Incoterms 2020. Incoterms are referred to as international commerce. Incoterms are referred to as international commercial terms that are also known as trade terms. A set of rules published by the International Chamber of Commerce (ICC) which relates to the international commercial law. Adhere to the text to determining the responsibility of buyers and suppliers. These terms consist of the importance in case there is any future dispute to claim for the damages and identify the obligation on basis of Incoterms. Incoterms decide the following between the sellers and the buyers. Number 1, task, ownership, cost, ownership, risk, ownership. That who is responsible and who is taking the obligation of all these three factors. In total, we have 11 terms and we'll explain them all one by one later. So let's look into the 11 terms. X work, EXW, also known as X warehouse, FCA, free carrier, FAS, free alongside ship, FOB, free on board, CFR, cost and freight, CIF, cost, insurance and freight, CPT, carriage paid to, CIP, carriage and insurance paid to, DAP, delivered at place, DPU, which replaced DAT, delivered at place unloaded, DDP, delivered duty paid. Incoterms are divided into two categories: multimodal Incoterms and second is sea, inland, waterway Incoterms. What is multimodal Incoterms? These Incoterms rules can be used for any mode of transportation: air, water, land and rail. X work, FCA, CPT, CIP, DAP, DPU and DDP. Sea, inland, waterway Incoterms, which are carrying the bulk cargo. Incoterm rules can be used only for the water transportations: FAS, FOB, CFR and CIF. Point to be noted: shipment might go through air freight or by sea freight, and some sort of the documents and the obligations required. Number 1 is the packing, how the item is packed, preparing documentation, import port document completions, contracting with the carrier, inland carrier, loading, unloading, export clearance, contracting with the main carrier, vessel or the aircrafts, you could say, loading on the main carrier, unloading at the destination port or airport, import clearance, contracting with the inland carrier in the import area, loading, unloading at the destinations. These were the tasks which are important to understand before going into detail of the Incoterms. Now let's understand the Incoterms impact on the shipment and how the responsibilities shift from seller to buyer or from buyers to seller. Our first Incoterm is X work. This is the most common Incoterm used in the worldwide to import or export the shipment from one origin to another. The important point to remember as follows: the seller is only responsible for having the goods packed, made available at the seller's premises or the warehouse only. The second point: the buyer bears the full risk and cost from the supplier premises to the destination, including the loading of the cargo. Example: there is a purchase agreement between buyer and supplier. Seller origin is in USA and the buyer exists in UAE. In the agreement, both parties agreed to the trade on Incoterms X work. Buyer will nominate his freight forwarder or courier to collect the items from exporter warehouse. The seller or exporter will hand over the items to the truck, who will take the item to the port for the custom clearance and necessary documentation. After custom clearance in USA, shipment will be loaded to the airplane or the ship, depend on the mode of shipments. The shipment will transit from USA to UAE and buyer will process the custom clearance and shipment will be released and hand over to truck direct to the importer buyer warehouse. All the cost related from the pickup from the seller warehouse till reach to the buyer warehouse must be paid by the buyer or importer. In Export Incoterm, seller only responsible to produce and prepare the product for collection only. Buyer or seller will be responsible to pay all the cost and also including in case of any loss or damage happen after picking the shipment from the exporter warehouse till reaching the product at buyer warehouse. Insurance is optional in this Incoterm if buyer is willing to insure goods or product. So it's very simple and most common Incoterm being used nowadays in worldwide. Our second is FCA or FOB. So guys, I'm combining all this Incoterms. So there are minor variation and this will help you to remember as well. So FCA is free carrier. Seller is only responsible for the delivery to the named place. The seller is responsible for loading, risk and cost are transferred to the buyer as soon as delivered at the named place. So here the buyer and seller will agreed on the named place that you will arrange the item and deliver to this named place, and later on all the risk and cost will be transferred to the buyer. Unloading is the buyer responsibility as well. So buyer will unload the item and he will bear the cost. Here seller will not unload the product at the named place. He will take the product from his warehouse and park in the named place. So there the buyer will be responsible to unload the item and take it forward. FOB free on board. Seller is responsible for goods loaded on board the vessel. Risk and cost are transferred as soon as the goods have been loaded on the board the vessels. Here you see the small differences there. Free on board, that seller will be responsible to take the product on the board and he will load the item there. So as soon as he load the item, all the risk and cost will be transferred to the buyer. In FCA shipment, exporter ensure the product readiness and load the item in its own truck, then transport to the airport only. FCA Incoterm used for the air freight only. In FOB shipment, the exporter ensure the product readiness and load the item in its own truck and transport to the seaport. Port name must be identified in this case. Also, exporter responsibility ended once the product reached to the port or airport if Incoterm is FCA, and seaport if the Incoterm is FOB. In these two Incoterms, insurance is optional. Next is CFR, cost and freight, CIF, cost, insurance and freight, CIP, carriage and insurance paid to, CPT, carriage paid to. I'm grouping the Incoterms which have very minor variation and easy to understand to you. I took these four Incoterms together because these are applicable on the same point. There are minor differences which cause confusion. I will explain it to you to understand better. In the CFR, nearest port of exporter or seller, shipment loading, custom clearance and dispatch the shipment from origin like USA. All the costs incurred at the origin till loading items in the ship will be covered by the exporter. Importer will process the custom clearance and loading into the truck, then move to the shipment to the buyer warehouse in UAE. All these costs will be covered by the importer. In the CIF, this is exactly same as CFR, but only addition is insurance. That insurance cost is tolerated by exporter or seller. You saw the small difference, only the insurance. Cost, insurance, freight, CIF. In the CIP, it has also insurance involved, but it is paid or placed. Here the insurance is optional, but importer and exporter will agree who will bear the insurance cost. Most of the time, insurance cost is paid by exporter. Seller arranges the transportation cost and insurance on behalf of the buyer to the named place at the destination. Risk is transferred to the buyer once delivered at the first carrier. Here you notice that the insurance is optional. Clear? The next is in the CPT. Exporter arrange the transportation and cost to the named destination. Risk is transferred to the buyer once delivered at the first carrier. If you see, all are look similar. It start with C, but there is small additions. Only the insurance optional insurance is required, and insurance will be on the willing of the both parties. The next is DAP and DPU. DAP delivered at place, DPU delivered at place unloaded. So DAP seller delivers the goods to the agreed place at the destination. The seller assumes all cost and risk until the goods are ready for unloading at the named place of the destination. For example, Dubai port. Here the duty will be paid by the importer. The rest of the cost will be paid by exporter. Exporter must deliver the items to the destination which has been mentioned in the agreement. So delivered at place. DPU, delivered at place unloaded. It's very close with each other. Seller assume all costs and risk until the goods are unloaded at the agreed named place of destination. Buyer is responsible for import, custom and formalities. Here he will bring the shipment but he will not unload the products. There is a buyer responsibility to unload the product. Next is DDP, delivery duty paid. Seller deliver goods to the agreed place destination. Seller assume all cost, including import formalities and risk, until the goods are ready for unloading at the named place of the destination. Mostly samples are sent through the DDP or the cost paid by the seller or exporter. Last but not least is FAS, free alongside ship. Seller is responsible for delivering goods at the port alongside the vessels, the agreed point. From this point onward, risk and cost transfer to the buyer. They are free alongside the ship that he will bring the shipment and park the shipment close to the vessel, and their responsibility will be ended, and on forward the risk and cost transfer to the buyer or importer. The next is the chart of the Incoterms 2020. You can see it is more easy for you to understand and what is the responsibility of the buyer and what is the obligation of the seller. On basis of that, it will help you to communicate and make the effective agreement between you and the supplier. On basis of that, you can save a lot of cost, which will have more control on your shipments, which will help you to ensure your product, and it will help you to also go for further dispute in case there is a damages happen. And thank you for watching this channel. Keep in touch.